טוב, תודה רבה. זו פלטפורמה נאה לשיחה, ואת הסבב הבא אני הייתי מבקש מכל אחד מהדוברים להקדיש אל הצד ההלכתי המעשי, או הייתי אומר הצד המוסרי המעשי. זאת אומרת, מכיוון שאנחנו עוסקים כאן לא באנשים שהם עוסקים במחקר בהקשר הזה, אלא הם מנהיגי ציבור ומנהיגי קהילה, ויש להם איזושהי אמירה לגבי העם היהודי. אבקש מכם לעסוק בשאלה המעשית. מהם האתגרים הנורמטיביים, ההלכתיים, שעומדים היום מול העם היהודי בכלל, והיהדות הקונסרבטיבית בפרט? אני יודע שהסוגיה של נבואה והלכה כן נכנסה לתוך הסוגיה ההומולסבית. אני חושב שאחד הדברים המרכזיים שאנחנו עומדים מולם היום זה נישואי תערובת, לאור הדוחות האחרונים של 2013. יש הרבה מאוד סוגיות כבדות משקל שהעם היהודי כעם יהודי דן בהם, והעם היהודי מול העמים האחרים. האם נבואה בתוך ההקשר ההלכתי הזה זה תועלת או קלקול? כן? האם אנחנו היינו רואים את הנבואה כדבר שיכול לגאול אותנו מהיתקעות בחשיבה הלכתית צרה, או שהכניסה של המערכת הנבואית לתוך השיח ההלכתי מקלקלת את השורה ביכולת שלנו לפתור את הבעיות האלה? אחר כך נעשה סיבוב.
Wow, okay. אפשר פחות. So I am actually delighted. Actually, one thing that I know that Rabbi Golinkin and I can agree on is we probably both do not accept being characterized as being at the kotev, right? Because, you know, it's a well-known axiom that every person is a moderate and it's everyone else who's the extremist. So we are both moderates here. I am very a little surprised but very glad that Rabbi Golinkin brought a reference to that talk that Rabbi Gerson Cohen of blessed memory gave in 1983 at the Rabbinical Assembly Convention. It was just a couple of a month and a half following the 10th Yortzeit. Because I wanted to say something about that in this round and to put it in a historical context for Rabbi Cohen. In 1980, he addressed the Rabbinical Assembly, was feeling very despondent at the moment by the fact that the Rabbinical Assembly and certainly the faculty of the seminary had essentially pushed aside and all but ignored the recommendations of a commission that he had established to study the ordination of women, and that the Rabbinical Assembly declined to act on it at its 79 convention and tossed it over to the faculty where they knew it was not likely to pass anytime soon. It actually only took a few years. It was not long after that speech in 83. But in any event, in that 1980 speech, which I listened to very intently, Cohen said something rather remarkable. At the end of the speech, he coined a term that probably had never been used before. He said that rabbis who do not face up to their responsibilities, to their interpretation of God's will, such a person, he says, is kovesh rabbanuto. Now, this was a play on the phrase kovesh nevuato, which was the Mishnah's way of describing Yonah ben Amittai and others like him who have this deep sense of what happened to God, right? This deep intuition, and simply suppress it. And just to make sure that no one missed the point, he glossed kovesh rabbanuto with kovesh nevuato. And his introducing that word nevuah into that speech in 1980 was remarkable to me. And it turns out it was remarkable to him too, that what he had come to understand by going through that process, because what he said, listen to what he said 3 years later when he gave that talk on the 10th Yortzeit. He talked about when Heschel came to the seminary in 1945. He said, to a large extent, we, meaning he and his fellow students at the time, we found him unintelligible. And I think the time has come some 38 years later to say why. We were not ready to listen to Heschel's re-examination of the past, nor had he been prepared to understand how and why by the time we students had come to the seminary, sometime between the ages of 21 and 25, we were already confirmed critics of traditional beliefs. And the traditional beliefs clearly here are traditional beliefs about the reality of God in the world, the reality of God's will. Inevitably, he said, there was a chasm between us. But then he said, Heschel understood the loneliness of the long-distance thinker. He understood how lonely the philosopher will be in trying to impart a message of transcendence that will speak to one's own age and to future generations. As Heschel tells us, Torah min hashamayim is not just a phrase. Torah min hashamayim is different from Torah miSinai. So here he was 3 years later reflecting on how he had come to the convictions he came to in this whole sugya of hasmachat nashim and shivyoniyut in general, how he came to that and came to think of it as a davar nevu'i, that he understood that somehow subliminally the things that Heschel had difficulty getting across to these cynical too early students had somehow penetrated after all of those years, and he was giving tribute to him belatedly in 1983. So it is not just, Nivua didn't just enter it in these sugya about homosexual and lesbian Jews and homosexuality and lesbianism generally, but it was already there in this earlier sugya about the role of women in Judaism. And for that and the homosexuality issue, there was, for the people who came to a recognition that the halakha psuka was pointing to something that people felt deeply, and in a collective way, not just idiosyncratic single views, that there was something that didn't jibe with what we understood about the will of God in that, which didn't mean everyone had to see it, or certainly everyone didn't see it that way. But the question is about whether it's legitimate to see it that way and to feel it that way when one has a community that feels it. That these things that were deeply held about both of these issues were things that were spoken of by Heschel himself. So here's one of the things he wrote. He said, resignation and acceptance of the inscrutable will of God are expressions of normal piety. In contrast, though not in contradiction, stands the prophet who, instead of being unquestioning and submissive in the face of God, dares to challenge his judgment, to remind him of his covenant, and to plead for his mercy. All the male pronouns, of course. This is, quoting from the original. But he also went on to say that reading texts with an overabundance of deference was to deny the deeper meaning of the oral Torah, because faithfulness to a plain meaning of a particular verse or a particular psak halacha can amount to faithlessness with the broader process of reading Scripture as part of a covenant, as part of a bilateral and mutual brit. So the Bible was appealed to as one of the sources for the critique of halakha. And it was done. That was done in the sugya on women, and it was done in the sugya on gays and lesbians. And here's one of the most telling things that I think Heschel had to say about this rigid line that Rabbi Golynkin has drawn for us between the Navi and the Posek. Each one has its domain, and there is halakha and there is agadah. Agadah is one Posek in the 18th century said these are the things that are ikarei hadat, these are the fundamental things of religion, what goes on in agadah, but they have no say in the realm of halakha, which is kind of a remarkable thing to say. The fundamentals of religion have no say in the world of halakha. So Heschel, in the third book of the third volume, again, of Torah Min HaShamayim, in a chapter called Nigla V'Nistar, he said, some say there is a rigid line between what is revealed and what is concealed, that the domain of one is in the heavens while the domain of the other is in the earth. Lo b'shamayim hi, halakha is down here, it's in our hands, and all the stuff in the heavens we're happy to listen to. Great to hear from you, God, but no standing in court. And Heschel went on to say, the mitzvah of Hagbala is an ongoing mitzvah. Remember, the mountain was cordoned off, right, for 3 days. He's saying that there are supposed to be boundaries set forever. Can one really believe that there are divisions between those things that we love and for which we yearn? And then the phrase here was Hayesh Tchumim B'Meyayim, right, which was the Midrash saying how Abraham, when he says, "Your bincha asher ahavta," he says, I love both of them. Hayesh Tchumim B'Meyayim. How can we say that there are divisions between halakha and agadah? How can we say there's divisions between halakha and nivua, psak halakha and nivua? If we have two ways of seeking God's will, our reason and our intuition, how can we allow one to vanquish the other? If one were to do that, and halachic practice, he says, has done exactly that, then if someone gets it right, it is by pure chance. And the phrase he uses here is, again, a Talmudic phrase, which he loved to do, as Rabbi Golynkin said, mituchkam is very, very clever stuff. He says it is a kasuma ba'aruba. There's a blind person who just by pure chance finds the opening into the skylight in the house. You're doing it by pure chance, but you're not doing it in an intentful, mindful way. That is the way of religion. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm sure other things will come up in questioning. But I still have 5 minutes. Okay. So let me. Good. Amarti lo lenakot. Right. Okay. So you brought up Nisuei Tarovet. I think Nisuei Tarovet is quite a different issue. I don't think of it as an issue that one would imagine the halachot psukot about the isur of Nisuei Tarovet as giving God the same kind of pain. It gives humans pain. And for good reason. And the reason that I don't see it that way is because obviously these are things unlike sexual orientation, unlike gender identity, unlike mamzerut, you can't control. It's not something that you did, but people can actually convert to Judaism. But there are some matters to consider, and I'm just going to be very straight with you here because I am a nogea badavar. Since I have a daughter-in-law who is not Jewish. And that makes me, in one way, a little biased, but it also makes me a little wiser. And there may be people in this room who share that with me. There are matters to consider that may in some ways touch on kind of intuitions about religious life and about what God would ask of us in the world in which we actually live. So one of the things, of course, is an insight that David Tzvi Hoffman had already about edut and being a mechalel Shabbat b'farhesia, about the insight about changed meanings of identical actions. What being a mechalel Shabbat in Berlin in 1900, certainly being a mechalel Shabbat b'farhesia in 2000 14 in my place in the United States, where probably a large percentage of the people who spend most of their time working for, on behalf of, and losing sleep over the welfare of the Jewish people are not Shomrei Shabbat, doesn't have the same meaning as what it once had in a different setting, in a corporate Jewish setting, in which to be a Mechalel Shabbat B'Farhesia was to be telling Judaism to go to hell. So Nisuei Tarovet is no longer entirely what it once was. Right? It wasn't a rebellion against me or my tradition. It certainly wasn't a rebellion against God. It was actually falling in love. It doesn't make it less problematic from the corporate point of view, but it gives you a different insight into what is happening within this human being that is living out the something of this spark and this tselem. There is also the fidelity of partners to very high Jewish values. People who are very attracted to Judaism but won't convert because of Kibud Av Va'em. Now, how do you think ill of a person who is honoring one of the Aseret HaDibrot, right? And the contributions to us in terms of raising Jewish children of those who are not of us, and maybe not yet of us, maybe will never be of us, but are making enormous